Certainly. Now, her background, she'd spent time in Pakistan, and she had studied at this Al-Huda Center. Looking back on it, though, the implications for international security, is there any way that international officials, and particularly those in the United States, when she came here, that would have triggered any red flags?
I think it would be too difficult and take up too many resources if we were to try and figure out the intentions or the future intentions of anyone coming back from attending an institute like that. Of course, it does seem that this will have had some sort of bearing on her future actions, but it's impossible to know if someone coming back from Pakistan and who's been attending a madrasa is necessarily going to be a violent extremist in the future. So it's something that we need to be very careful with. And I think one thing that it does draw attention to is that the fact that there's a term that keeps floating around regarding the San Bernardino attacks, self-radicalization. I don't think that was the case. I think that's a bit of a misnomer, actually. Clearly, there is a long process at work here and a set of factors, material and otherwise, that have contributed to these individuals' eventual embarking on carrying out the attacks that they did. And saying self-radicalization kind of implies that it happened in a bubble. Evidently, it did not happen in a bubble. And we need to make sure that we get our terminology lined up with the reality in order to avoid kind of making these mistakes again in future.
Why do you say it did not occur in a bubble?
Because in anyone's path towards becoming a radical, violent Islamist, there are external influences. Even if these influences are offline or online, if they're not kind of happening in the real world, if they're happening on social media, that kind of thing, that's still an external influence. And it's really important to recognize that someone doesn't just go onto the internet, start kind of plugging into Islamic State propaganda online, and then suddenly, over a period of a few months, become a supporter of Islamic State. It's the human contact that actually leads to that kind of thing. So, yes, propaganda is very important, and Islamic State's propaganda itself is very important in this because it does kind of empower people and make people kind of feel defiant in the face of the status quo, that kind of thing. But the propaganda alone is not the thing which is radicalizing people. It's the kind of purveyors of the jihadist ideology that are convincing individuals to go down this path, this trajectory. They're the issue. They're the kind of outreach officers that we need to be dealing with, as well as propaganda. But we just need to make sure that we look at it as a holistic issue rather than just kind of pinning the blame on social media corporations for letting propaganda be posted on their websites. It's much, much more than that.
So these could be contacts, say, at schools, but also, say, at mosques or friends or other types of contacts as well.
Absolutely, and the list can go on and on and on, and that's one of the things which is most difficult about this, but we have to kind of respect the fact that radicalization is something that cannot be generalized. There are lots and lots of different processes at work here, lots of different relationships that can lead to it. And yeah, often it will be contacts at mosques or friends. I mean, we've seen a lot of recruitment by friendship happening in Europe, specifically in view of Islamic State. People kind of from the same year at school going to join each other in Syria and Iraq because they've stayed in touch with their classmates who have gone to join the group, and then they're recruited from Syria and Iraq. But what's really important to recognize is that it's not, again, recruitment itself is also a bit of a misnomer because it suggests that this is an on-off status, that you can just go from being a non-recruit to suddenly being a fully-fledged member of Islamic State or a fully-fledged violent extremist. It doesn't work like that. It's a much longer process, and there are a lot of different factors on the path towards becoming a fully-fledged violent extremist. And it's those factors, as well as the things which kind of set up the fertile ground for radicalization, that we need to be looking to deal with, not just kind of firefighting the propaganda or firefighting specific extremist preachers.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
That's all right. Thank you.